Welcome everyone. My name's Martin Hawson and I'm CEO with Mildura Rural City Council, and welcome to our first community flood update. I'd just like to start by acknowledging the traditional owners and custodians of the land which now comprises Mildura Rural City Council municipality. We pay our respects to the elders past and present and celebrate and respect their continuing cultures and acknowledge the memories of their ancestors. So really what this presentation is about is really to get an update from key people that are in control of our response to the flood situation in Mildura and get some insights into the latest information. This is important obviously if you are being impacted by the floods, but also from a community perspective around what we're actually doing to prepare for the floods. So hopefully you'll find the information really useful. So tonight you'll hear from our Incident Controller Mark Cattell, our General Manager Operations James Kilderman from Mallee CMA, Acting General Manager Daryl Morgan from Council, Acting General Manager Mark Jenkins from Council, and Superintendent John O'Connor from Victoria Police. First off, we'll hand over to Mark, who'll give us a bit of a situation update on the latest information.
Thank you, Martin. Welcome everybody. The prognosis at this stage hasn't changed from the last week or so. We're still looking at a level or a peak of 38.6 metres. We are seeing some peaks further upstream, at which stage it allows the Bureau of Meteorology to make better predictions for us, and we'll see those better predictions coming our way in the very near future. What we're doing in preparation is we're trying to keep the community well advised about what is going on. We're certainly asking the community to heed any warnings that we do put out, and we did put an emergency warning out this afternoon to evacuate an area in Iraq, and that was purely because the access to that area is going to be cut due to road erosion, which is making the road unsafe. And that road's going to be closed for quite a period of time. We're not sure how long, but even once the river has receded, that road is going to need to be checked. So any community who decide to stay there after 8 p.m. tonight are going to need to be prepared to be there for the long haul. We're also doing a lot of other levy works that we've approved to protect critical infrastructure and expensive and very expensive cropping areas. We don't take those decisions lightly. We make sure that not only are the rest of the community going to be impacted by those works are advised, but we also talk to our partners over in New South Wales to make sure there's not going to be any impacts over there. We do currently have the river closed all the way right up to Nuttram Billabong, and we've asked New South Wales to do that purely because of the impact of boating on the river and what further erosion that can cause. So we've not taken that lightly, because we are very concerned and aware of the impacts that has on people visiting the city. We're also doing a lot of works along Calkine Way to try to make sure that remains open again, to support industry and to support workers working down that way. So we're certainly getting busy. Our workload is ramping up, and we'll be seeing our Incident Control Centre change somewhat over the next few days to become a 24-hour operation, and that'll probably happen next week.
Thanks, Mark. One of the questions that we're often getting when we're conducting community meetings around the municipality is where we can get sandbags.
Yeah, it's a really good question, and in the next couple of days we're going to be advising through our community advice and our messaging on social media where those locations will be. We will be having evening sessions where the local unit here in Mildura will have sandbags available from 5 to 7 p.m. But as we get closer toward the end of the week, we will also look at some additional locations for that.
Thanks, Mark. You mentioned about river closures. When can we expect the river up Mildura end of at the Mildura end, and why would we be closing that if it was to close?
Yeah, so the reason we close it is because the wake from boats and boating on the river will cause more erosion than we are already seeing from the fast flowing river. And if you've been down and had a look at the Murray recently, it's flowing very, very fast. So that erosion given and together with additional wave action from boating will make that position a lot worse. So we'll basically keep it that way until we're comfortable that the water level is back to a level that's not going to knock down all of those levees that we're putting in place.
The other one that's an interesting topic is the building of levees on private land.
Yep.
Can you outline what the process for that is?
Yeah, if anybody wants to build a levee on private land, they need to make sure that they come through the ICC and propose how that's going to occur. We can approve those depending on what the impacts might be, and we'll go through an options analysis process to determine whether or not it's going to be a worthy option. We don't do that on our own. We work with the council, we work with the CMA, and we work with the other authorities to make sure that we make the right decisions. And again, we don't take those decisions lightly because we know there are people on both sides of those levees.
Thanks, Mark. I'd like to just go over now to James Kilderman, who's the General Manager Operations and Community with the CMA. I've heard James speak a number of times now, and it's always learned something. So, James, can you give us your overview of the situation?
Yep, happy to provide an update on what's happening with the river and what we think may happen into the future. Just by way of background, CMAs in these sort of events have a role in supporting the Incident Control Centre and Mark's team with flood intelligence. And that looks like mapping products really to predict the inundation footprint that may occur from the high river event. We use a mid-Murray flood study. That's a product we created over the past 3 years, and that uses data from past flooding events to inform what may occur in the future. Floods such as those that occurred more recently in 2016, 2011, but as far back as 1956 and the 1974 flood. It is really important to note though, models such as our mid-Murray flood study are just that, they're just a model. They're informed by past flooding events, and we do know that every single flood is different. High rainfall prior to a flooding event may mean land is less likely to soak water in and more water will run off. So that's just one example of how each flood is different, and so it should be used as a planning tool only, not as a definitive answer to where exactly water will go. It is, however, our very best tool in assisting and anticipating where water may potentially go, and for people to plan activities to prepare. That mid-Murray flood study mapping is available on the Council's website, has been for 2 weeks now, and that's informed by the current Bureau of Meteorology forecast for the river. So once we get a Bureau of Meteorology forecast, we can plug that into the model and get an inundation footprint such as available for everyone to plan to. So the Bureau of Meteorology forecast is therefore really important, and we've spoken in the past about how the Bureau prepares that at previous meetings, and they review their modelling every single day, and they do that with river operators such as the Murray-Darling Basin Authority, with Water New South Wales who operate the Murray River as well, and with Victorian agencies, and even anecdotal information from landowners who may be inundated upstream. So it's a very dynamic process, a very thorough process that they go through every day to update. And what we've seen is the prediction hasn't changed considerably over the past 2 weeks. It went up 100 mil some time back, but at the moment the current forecast is for 38.6 metres AHD. Don't get too caught up on that, that's just metres above sea level, and that's the number that we can plug into our model and predict the inundation footprint from. What I will say is though, and did say 2 weeks ago, you could consider that current prediction as something akin to a long-range weather forecast. The confidence is not extremely high because it's dependent upon flows in 3 upstream rivers joining the Murray River. That is the Edward Warcool system, the Murrumbidgee River, and of course the flows coming down the Murray. They all combine upstream of Robinvale, and when the waters get into the Murray and there's a peak in the Warcool, you can then predict with more confidence what we might see in our reach of the river down here. So over the past 2 weeks, those flows have been making their way overland, and we've started to realise what looks like it may almost be a peak. So there's a slowing or a plateauing of the flows that are coming in particular from the Warcool system, which has been the river which is contributing the bulk of the flows upstream of Ruppen Vale. And so what we can expect now is that the Bureau, in the coming days, and even potentially as soon as today, they may look to revise their forecast for our part of the river, and it's likely that that may see a slight reduction in height. But we need to wait. The Bureau will finalise their numbers in consultation with all of those other agencies I mentioned previously to make sure all the on-ground observations are clear. And what we will get is a forecast for the early part of December that has a higher level of confidence than the current forecast, because those flows are now in the river. So that's really helpful for us. What I would say though is that in the past 2 weeks we have seen renewed flows in the Murray River upstream of Tocumwal, and there is a likelihood that that will see renewed rises in the Edward River, which does rejoin the Murray again down near or upstream of Boundary Bend. So there is a potential for increased rises again from the Edward River after this current peak, and as well too with the Murrumbidgee. So we're seeing increased flows from the Murrumbidgee at the moment, and so there is also a chance in the future that we may see renewed rises from the Murrumbidgee. But that's all yet to come. It's still very early days there, and of course if there is a revised forecast coming from the Bureau of Meteorology, it will include and take into consideration any of the changes that are occurring in those other creek systems. The other thing to note is people often ask, how long will the high flows be around for? That is a very tricky question to answer, again, with high confidence. But what we do know is the high flows will be prolonged, definitely well into December. But as we get into the start of December, there will no doubt be a clearer indication of what is in the upstream catchments, and we'll have a clearer picture of when the major flooding and moderate flooding will come to a conclusion. Probably just to recap, inundation mapping. We know that the inundation maps are very useful for community. The ones to look at are the 2% maps, which just means it's a flood that's likely to occur 2 times in every 100 years. The current forecast that we have for Mildura is under that just by a little bit, but as I've indicated, we are likely to have a new forecast that has a high confidence rating in the near future, and we'll look to update maps if and when that's necessary after that forecast comes through, and we'll share that on the council website when that becomes available. I would also note to any of the residents who are from New South Wales listening in, the mapping has not been quality assured for the New South Wales side. It's a product created by the Victorian Government, so please refer to our New South Wales counterparts for accurate information for the New South Wales side of the river. And so in closing, the Bureau's provided us with a reach forecast at currently 38.6 metres, which is likely to be revised down in the coming days, and we'll communicate that to you when we have that. And the indicative maps are still available for viewing, which is your primary source of information about where the waters may go, and that's available on the council website.
Thanks, James. So just in summary there, the key point I heard was that the forecast looks like it's been coming down.
We've seen the peak, what looks to be the peak. So there's a plateauing of the river up at Warcool, and that's our key flow contributor at this point in time. So that, and it's a little earlier than anticipated, or a little lower than anticipated. So hopefully that is the peak, and if so, then the downstream forecast will be revised and possibly down.
And you mentioned about how long. I'm guessing that's predicated on a lot of the water that's still being released from our major catchments at Dartmouth and Hume, that they're obviously still releasing water, so that will then obviously flow down eventually. So we've got to take that into account when we're trying to predict whether we're still going to be dealing with this at Christmas.
That's exactly right, and flows that are released this week from Hume Dam are unlikely to reach here for another 6 weeks.
Right.
And so it's not something that will necessarily increase the height of the predicted flood for here, but it will certainly increase the duration that we have high flows in our area, and that's why we're looking at the moment about what's happening with the Edward River, if that will see renewed rises on the back of those releases from Hume, and same with the Murrumbidgee River. If anything from the storm events in central western New South Wales contributes to the Murrumbidgee River, then we need to take that into consideration as well too for prolonged flows.
Yeah. Thanks, James.
Very welcome.
Just come back to Mark just for a moment. I'm interested. I've noticed there is a considerable amount of visitors in town, and they've all got high vis and uniforms on. Can you give us a bit of indication of actually how many support staff have actually come into town to support this process?
Yeah, it's a really good question. We've got 3 task forces at least in town at the moment. They're out doing sandbagging and helping with ground observations, as well as other critical operations to support the IMT, the Incident Management Team. We'll continue to see that, and we'll probably see it ramp up over the next few weeks to make sure that we get all the work done that we need to by the time that we need to have that done.
Thank you. Thanks, James and Mark. I'll now have a chat with Daryl. Daryl's works with us at council. Daryl's our acting general manager development, and anything to do with the construction or our infrastructure falls under Daryl's responsibility. So I'll start. Daryl, can you give us a bit of an outline of what's actually been going on around the town?
Yeah, thanks, Martin. I think the first thing probably to do is just to set the scene about what council's responsibility is in respect to this major flood event. And as we know, we don't necessarily lead this flood impact. This is obviously through Vic SES, so we provide a support role. And what does that mean? That actually means we provide resources, engineering, any other assistance, and things such as providing sand, providing logistics for mapping as well, which is assisting the CMA to be able to predict where the potential hotspots are, is something our engineering team's been doing. But also you may have seen some previous works in the lead up to the flood event over the last 2 or 3 weeks that have been occurring, particularly along the riverfront. So things such as disconnecting some of our public toilets, removing pumps, electrical systems. So that's been ongoing, and obviously that's occurred since we've had the notification about the flood starting to increase. In regards to some of the other physical works, people may have seen some major construction works happening along Ranfurly Way. So we've been directed by the SES, and we've been involved in obviously looking at where the potential spots are that might be inundated if the river gets up beyond what's already there. So we're at the moment constructing a significant levee along Ranfurly Way, which protects that area which is commonly known as the three May corner, through to where the sewage farm comes in on the back end. So at the moment we've got our teams, and also, when I say teams, our current staff and also contractors working on that construction. Now that's a significant piece of work that's happening, and obviously will be deployed in other areas to build other levees. So at the moment we've already built a levee out at the Elter grain storage silo, and that really ensures that the farmers, once they start bringing their crops in, have somewhere to securely store for their grain. A couple of other ones which will probably happen, and as most people will be aware, the Lower Murray Water is actually constructing on top of an existing levee around the sewage treatment farm. So we'll be tacking into the back end of that as well. And there's another one that's planned along a section of Eddiewander Avenue down near the wetlands, which is really about protecting the wetlands and ensuring that when we have a storm event, we can actually pump the stormwater out of the treatment system.
All right. I noticed there's obviously that's quite a significant capital works job, and we're doing it in a very short space of time. How many people are actually working, or how have we diverted resources towards this task?
Yeah, so one of the issues for us, I suppose, is the resources we have, and we do have a significant workforce when it comes to construction equipment and obviously staff to be able to do that. But we've brought in a number of contractors, so at the moment we've probably got anywhere between 20 to 30 staff and contractors working on this particular levee. The other thing just to probably point out though, Martin, is it's critical that we still maintain current services. So everybody expects the roads to be open. So where we're getting storm events, we get potholes, so we still need to have staff who can maintain, repair our roads, but also garbage collection, sanitation. They're all things that we need to make sure we keep operating at the moment. So definitely resources are being deployed, and which means some of our current construction projects have been put on hold to allow that to happen.
Probably the other thing, I guess, is in the decision making to build such a big levee. What was the process that you went through to actually get to this point?
So normal process is, and obviously CMA have a lot of intelligence with their mapping. So normally what will happen is they'll have that high-end information, which then comes through to council, and our engineers will look at where we know there's potentially some hotspots. So we use our intelligence as well, which feeds into that. And then what we do is we recommend to the control agency that there might be a potential need for infrastructure work such as levees in these particular areas. Then they'll go through an options analysis and they'll look at the consequences of not building versus the consequences of building, and as was mentioned before, what impact that has upstream and downstream. And then once the green light's been given from the control agency, either council, contractors, or a direct relationship with other contractors will happen, and that's when the works will start.
Thanks, Darryl. So I guess this levy is really put in place to protect a large, not just residential area, but also the hospital that is in that zone and so forth. So there's been a fair bit of thought that goes into that. On the flip side of that, if there is some areas in the low-lying areas, particularly where there's not those situations where people could find themselves being inundated, we then move into a relief and I guess recovery phase, but particularly a relief phase. So I've got Mark Jenkins, who's the acting General Manager Community, is the Municipal Recovery Manager. Mark, can you tell us about if people did find themselves in that situation, what support is available, how would they go about getting access to that?
Yeah, sure. So council's role is around relief and relief planning initially, and obviously recovery in the long term. So any resident who's displaced or concerned even can contact council on our number on 50188100, and council has got a relief service in place at the moment to residents to talk through any issues they may have, and councils make connections with other services to direct people to those services. So it may be things around accommodation, could be around grants, financial support, or any sort of diverse range of issues that might arise as part of a flood event. So residents can also go to council's website. So on the council's website, there's a whole range of services available to people to support them through a flood. A lot of information around clean-up, around relief services, around grants. So that's all included on the website. And also council libraries are available for someone who's lost an internet connection or doesn't have a connection. They go to our library, and our libraries will provide assistance to residents to access a website, maybe even complete certain information or help them out in general about information. So that's at the Rector's Library, Merbeen Library or Mildura Library. So if you are evacuated, and I know there's been some that happened today, or you need to leave home, you need support, so you can contact council, you can give us a ring, we can direct you to the appropriate services that you might need. So that could be, again, a diverse range of things, or if it's your neighbour, even you need to support someone in the community, you can still direct them to council for any advice or support. So yeah, best place to go, council website, or you can drop into a library or for any support you might need.
Thanks, Mark. And is it right in saying if there were more people inundated, then we'd ramp that service up and ramp up that access as required, and that's part of our recovery approach.
Yeah, that's correct, and we've made those connections with other services to ensure they've got capacity to deliver, particularly around accommodation, which we're sort of aware of and monitoring how much demand there is in areas like accommodation and even mental health support.
And I understand that there's a whole group of services that sit behind this. This isn't just council services, but we work in with a lot of other organisations to actually provide that support. But I guess we navigate through that process to help people get access to that service quickly.
That's right.
Thank you. I'd also like to introduce John O'Connor, who's the Superintendent for Mildura. Obviously Vic Pole in any emergency play a really important role. Perhaps, John, if you could outline the role and also a bit of a situation update from your perspective.
Yes, thanks, Martin. So Victoria Police's role is to ensure effective coordination of the emergency services in any emergency. So Victoria Police are a support agency in this emergency, and we're not the control agency. The control agency is SES, and so we take the lead from SES, but we provide a number of staff into the Incident Control Centre to support the SES and the other agencies in there. I've probably just got some messages I've been monitoring the flood and working the flood since they were in Echuca and then all the way up through Swan Hill and now into Mildura. But the key message for Victoria Police is do not drive through floodwaters. You only have to be in 15 centimetres of running water, and you're in a light car, you can be washed off the road. Since this emergency has been going for the last 5 to 6 weeks, we have done over 300 vehicle-related rescues where people have driven into water where they shouldn't have. And what that means is that Victoria Police and other emergency services put their lives on the line, either rappelling out of helicopters or coming in on boats to rescue people who shouldn't have driven through flooded waters. Very important though, we spoke there about evacuation orders, and the control agency takes advice from a number of other agencies before they decide if there's to be an evacuation. But if you are notified that you're in an evacuation area, you really need to think what that control agency has said the SES to evacuate. If you choose not to go, that is a decision for you. But what I would ask all people in Mildura to do, if you're in an area that may be impacted by flooding, is to write down a flood plan and make sure it's realistic. If you're 70 years of age, don't write a flood plan with a 20-year-old brain happening, because you'll need to be physically and mentally prepared if you are going to stay and not heed the advice of the SES to evacuate. If you do write out a flood plan, please show it to someone other than your children or to a relative. Show it to someone you respect who will give you some honest feedback to say whether or not that is a realistic plan. So make sure that if you decide to stay, that you take into consideration what medicine, what food, drinking water, and what's your place of last resort. You need to consider that. Make sure that you also consider if you're on a septic system. If your septic goes under, it'll stop working, and then it could be in a number of days that you're required to be rescued. So please keep that in mind. Also prepare inside and out, including pets, animals, equipment and vehicles. Make sure if you do have firearms that it is your responsibility to remove those firearms and place them somewhere else secure, at another person's house who's got an approved firearm safe, a licensed firearm dealer, or at the last resort at the police station. I ask though, if you are intending to bring firearms to the police station, please do not walk into the police station carrying a firearm. Make an appointment, then park out the front, then ring the police station again, and a police officer will instruct you on what to do. In short, please do not drive through floodwaters. If you decide to stay, we may not be able to get to you for a considerable period of time. And write down a flood plan. Thanks, Mark.
Thanks, John, and thanks for those key messages. So that draws to a close for our first community flood update online. But I would just remind everyone that we are actually having a public meeting at the Mildura Sporting Precinct this Sunday. That's the 20th of November at 4 p.m. And this will provide a further update on the latest information, but it also gives you an opportunity to ask questions that may be concerned, and we can certainly, all the key agencies will be on hand to answer any of those questions. The meeting will be also streamed on our Facebook page, where there will be taking some questions, but given the volume that we get, we have to theme them and respond to the key questions. So if you really do have a question or have got concerns, please if you do come to the Sporting Precinct at 4 o'clock on Sunday, you'll be able to either talk face to face with some of our key agencies and get those questions answered. I guess the other message is that we're trying to keep people as informed as much as we can, but it is really each individual's responsibility to keep informed. There is a lot of key information out there. Probably the go-to sites are the SES site and or council site, and they'll provide you with all the information that we've talked about today, but also there's other technical information on there as well. So stay informed as much as you can. Look after your neighbours and your friends and family. This is very important, particularly those people that may be more vulnerable, or you see that they may need some help. It's really important that you look after those. Finally, just to thank you to the SES, Mallee Catchment Authority, VicPol, and from all of us at Council, stay safe.